Before I get started on the video, I'm going to explain a few things, mainly terms and classifications. If you don't care, skip to the timestamp on the screen to skip to the start of the video. There will be two terms that you'll need to know. They are Shevku and Chaitan. The Chaitan gods are gods who are members of the Chaitan. Simple enough. The Chaitan, for those of you who don't know, is the organization of gods that created Neuron, which created Paradise and who created much of the races. The Shevku are considered to be evil and malevolent deities. Now, obviously, evil is a very subjective term, and some gods can be considered Shevku or not, depending on the point of view of certain characters. This also includes some of the characters on this list, but that will be for you to decide. Another thing to note is that most of these gods are from religions on Ahri. Other religions from other continents are covered, and they will likely be more focused on in future videos. Also, some entries are actually entire religions rather than just simple deities, as some of them lack gods, number of gods, or they're just simply not developed enough to really, Also, the video will not show any visuals, so you can listen to this in the background if you wish. With that being said, sit back and enjoy the video. Aquadome. Aquadome is the Lordess of life and creation. She is the goddess who created Neuron, Paradise, and the Chaitan. She essentially is the closest that this world can get to an almighty god creator. Aquadome is said to be represented as a marble white human woman, though other sources depict her as a deer with white fur. Nonetheless, she serves as the head of the Chaitan, and she is the most important Chaitan of them all. She is the Mother Lordess, the mother of Neuron, and the mother of the Chaitan. She is said to have had many powers as well, and not just in creating things, but also in other actions. For example, during the 30,000s, she had to purify the Lord of Death and the Afterlife, Oleus, in order to help him into the Chaitan. She still regularly contacts mortals and sometimes gives even unbelievers certain blessings, such as cures for diseases and other healing powers. Dathan. Dathan is the husband of Aquadome and the lord of loyalty and order. In his earlier days, he was also the lord of justice, but he gave this up to Judicator, who will be mentioned later. Dathan is represented mostly as a wolf, with white fur. Dathan is largely seen as the god that keeps the Chaitan and Paradise running, ensuring that the realm is protected and watching for traitors and rebels. Dathan is somewhat considered a warrior god and has led numerous wars, either through warriors and kings he contacts, or he'll do it himself. One of his most infamous cases was the Emsheviks, a people of unknown origin in the Desertlands who worshipped Azura, who we'll talk about later. At this point, the Emsheviks were said to have been kidnapping children and sacrificing to Azura in brutal ways, and according to the Chaitan, the Emsheviks also committed numerous other horrific atrocities, which unfortunately went unnamed. Thus, Dathan led a military campaign, and through himself and the king of Timbus, he slaughtered the men and women and took the children to be raised as Chaitan worshippers. However, he isn't just a warlord. He orchestrates the defense of Paradise, who offers guidance to those in need, and he is said to have protected those on Neuron who worship and summon him. Euthuma is a bit more of an interesting case. Born only in the 2000s of the First Era, it is said that Euthuma emerged from the sky as a baby wielding a giant sword which would become known as Yurith. Euthuma grew up during the Overseer invasion, when Vilmicus, the Lord of Domination, invaded Neuron. It was Euthyma's duty to stop the invasion, and he certainly helped in doing so in many ways. But first, he was captured, tortured, and humiliated by the Overseers, before eventually being blessed by Aquadome and Dathan, which allowed for him to escape. He would lead numerous great battles and would eventually expel the overseers from the continent of Dunaland, or however you want to spell it, and then sailing to Ahri to finish Vilmicus off. It's unknown if Euthuma actually killed Vilmicus himself, but nonetheless, Vilmicus died only soon afterwards. After his death, Euthuma was elevated as a god, becoming the Lord of Determination, Balance, and Peace. And he is also largely called as the Bringer of Light. Euthuma would continue to serve in the Chiton and would play a large part in the events after the 2000s of the First Era. Azura. Azura is the first of the Shevku on the list, being the Lord of the Sins, with him having a head for each sin, somewhere between 7 all the way up to 20. Azura played a huge part in the early Chiton storyline, existing as a great force of destruction as he attempted to destroy the Chiton. It's unclear why Azura exactly wanted the Chiton destroyed, but for whatever reason, he led potentially thousands of attacks on the Chiton. Azura was not only known for his destruction, however, but for his overall interesting nature, we'll call it. He was a massive glutton for power, food, status, and sex. He was a destructive monster and a manipulator and liar who would do everything he could to stack the odds in his favor. Through his rampant sex, he had numerous children, some of whom would become very important, such as Anazurda and Thuras, who both will be mentioned. Eventually, he led a massive coalition of Shevku, who invaded Paradise during the War of Many Names, as it would become known. It was at this war when Azura was betrayed and killed, none other than by Vilmicus. Vilmicus is the Lord of Domination, alongside being the creator of an infamous monster race of creatures known as Overseers. These Overseers are shaped like him, being strange, scaly humanoids with a gigantic eyeball for a head. His birth is largely unknown, and he only really pops up at around 22,000 of the First Era. Vilmicus helped to defend Dathan against Azura during one of his invasions, and this led Vilmicus to being recognized and eventually joining the Chiton itself, becoming the Lord of Protection and Service. However, this collided with Vilmicus's ambitious personality, and being seen as the literal god of service, he began to create his own realm, separate from Paradise. Eventually, his realm was discovered, but this was after Vilmicus left the Chiton. Vilmicus would go on to create his realm, which would be commonly known as Green Reality, but that is not what they call it. I don't even have a name for it yet. And his people would become the Overseers. The Overseers are a huge subject, and their history, magic, religion is very complicated. But Vilmicus himself would become known for his 2 invasions of Nurun. The first invasion was in the 2000s of the First Era, as mentioned before, and the second era was much later, in the 600s of the Fourth Era. These invasions devastated Nurun, and after the first invasion, he was largely considered a Shevku within most religion due to his desire to conquer Nurun and his desire to eliminate all other religions, and yes, people too. Olius. Olius is the Lord of Death, and he was also once the Lord of the Afterlife. Olius has had numerous forms throughout his lifetime, but the most common is that of a skeletal-like figure, either known as a Tanaskam or Tanaskam, or however you want to call it, or a Skelnesser, which are creatures of skin which are made of bones, and their structure is similar to a skeleton. Olius was originally a warrior who was the son of Gen-Con, a huge subject that we'll cover later on. But later on, he left Gen-Con and became one of the 3 main Chiton. His title of Lord of the Afterlife was eventually taken away from him by the Chiton, and this started a downward spiral, leading to his eventual banishment sometime in 10,000. I really don't know the dates yet. After his banishment, Olius went mad, and he would use his soldiers and worshippers to massively massacre amounts of people. That was really terribly said, by the way. He was also led by an infamous... What? He also infamously led an invasion against Apollonora, another god who will be mentioned shortly. Here, he slaughtered millions of people in a matter of weeks and feasted on their bodies. He became maniacal as well and would become seen as a mad god of death, which is not a good combination. However, Oleus has been shown to have died on numerous occasions, and he's also been known to have been overthrown by Oleus. You can kinda, I guess, make of that as you will. I can make a more dedicated video to this subject about Oleus if you comment. Gosh, this was pretty bad to record. Vermain. Vermain is the lord of animals and the hunt. He is largely represented as either a wolf or deer. He is one of the children of Aquadome and Dathan, and is said to have been the creator of animals and some of the Vermani, which are animal people basically. He hasn't been worked on too much, but he is a highly respected god, and he is revered by most Chiton worshippers, and even some non-Chiton worshippers. He is said to help people by leading hunts, leading animals to people, and he gives many gifts too. As you can tell, not very developed yet. The Layer 2. Madurga. Madurga is the lord of all things knowledge. Madurga is one of the only gods who actually rarely shows up in physical form, though he does have a physical form. While initially a member of the Chiton, Madurga was simply disinterested and eventually left, creating his own realm to study about everything in existence, both before and after the Chiton came about. This realm would expand, and over time he would create the realm, not create, but he would enter the realm of Neuron through a series of books, which seem like normal books, but they contain valuable informations, and these books are portals to Madurga's realm. Madurga is complicated, with some considering him as a Shevku, due to his various monsters he's created, and the fact that Madurga exploits a lot of people who seek his knowledge. Others claim that he's more of a neutral god, due to the vast amounts of knowledge he holds, and the fact that Madurga and the Chitons sometimes cooperate. Take that as you will. Apollonora. Apollonora was the lord of destruction and chaos. He is represented as a huge red deity, the face of a rabid and aggressive animal of some kind, mainly because he had a snout. Apollonora was once the lord of construction, but his inability to control his anger led to him murdering people, which got him banished. In rage, he formed evil entities who would become known as the Denaimu, or something like that. And he launched an invasion against the Chiton, where for years he ravaged paradise and nearly destroyed it. During this invasion, he broke down large parts of paradise and used those parts to create his own realm of Nandazaz. He launched many more other attacks later on, and always urged his Denaimo, and worshippers to create as much destruction as possible. During the early Third Era, he was rebelled against by his two sons, who eventually killed him. That subject can be covered if you wish. Judicator. Judicator is the lord of justice and judgment. He is essentially the judge, the great judge of the Chiton. He hands out judgment to every single soul that enters paradise after death. Judicator's descriptions are very conflicting, as some depict him as a pale human wearing a white robe, while others depict him as being similar in design to a star. He is said to inflict both blessings and curses upon the lands of those who follow the Chiton code of law and those who deliberately go out of their way to harm the Chiton. This idea, though, of him cursing the land is very shaky at best. He's also the god that basically banishes everyone, so that's cool too. Anazurda. Anazurda is the Lord of Darkness. He is depicted as a humanoid, though shadowy god, with his skin said to be made of the shadows themselves. He is one of the many sons of Azura, and he is Azura's most beloved child. Anazurda was raised as a warrior, and a warrior of darkness Anazurda would become. He would create the 100 generals, who he used to help in his invasions of paradise. Anazurda is mostly known for the large number of Chitin that he has killed, which nearly included Dathan on several occasions. He is a war god of darkness, and it is said that his darkness still haunts paradise occasionally. Kietkis. I decided to throw a bit of an oddball out here and mention a god who is completely unrelated to the Chitin. He is the great arena god that belongs to the land of Goldland, which is southwest of Ahri. He is depicted as a huntha, which are panther and panther-like people. He rose to fame in the 18,000s of the First Era, when he defeated the World Eater Jarketh, preventing him from destroying Neuron. He later became the arena god, and sacrifices to Kietkis are paid in the blood of gladiators. Kietkis is mostly well known for his mythological stories, and literally hundreds of times where he's killed deities and gods and other sorts of things. That can be elaborated in future videos. Thuraz. Thuraz is the lord of curses and corruption. He is represented as a strange, octopus-like creature, though he does have a humanoid form. Thuraz is one of the many sons of Azura, and during his early life, he was trained to be a warrior. However, when Thuraz took the form of an octopus-like creature, Azura shunned and banished Thuraz, leaving him to his own. However, Thuraz placed a curse on his father, which said to have caused Azura to have failed on all of his attacks on Paradise. He then began to corrupt some of the Chitin, with notable members including Shadowmoor and even Olius himself. Valahum. Now, I really don't even know why I put him all the way up in layer 3, as he's pretty obscure, but he's here, so. Valahum is the lord of fertility and prosperity, and he is the most worshipped god in the Ashkenan religion. Valahum is depicted as a white humanoid bird with large wings and a red beak. Valahum is believed to largely be a different interpretation of Aquadome due to a number of similarities. Like Aquadome, Valahum is responsible for the creation of Neuron. He also creates gods similar to the Chitin, which are called the Ayaru. Valahum is not seen as a creator god, but he is also a warrior god as well, bringing home the idea that perhaps he's something more than just Aquadome. I'll let you pick the pieces. His most famous example is handing over a man named Abar Bir a sword named Auzlahum before telling him to conquer nearby lands. That is a whole subject for another video. Autoism. Once again, something that I probably shouldn't have put this high, but however. Autoism is a strange mix of shamanism, spiritualism, and the belief that one should be regularly connected to nature and his ancestors. They regularly worship and communicate with their ancestors and dead relatives. Autoists believe that there is no reincarnation, so in order to keep the dead happy, they must communicate with them, bring them gifts, and perform rituals for them. Autoists also believe in a largely naturalistic view of the world, and they are pacifists to most creatures outside of bugs, as bugs to Autoists are believed to be a curse sent by evil spirits. The main reason for why it is well known is because this is a term that is largely used to describe spiritual and shamanist religions. Tevar. Tevar is sometimes seen as the Lord of Wisdom, even though he never claims the title. Tevar is one of the few formless gods, meaning that he cannot be depicted, should not, and will not be depicted. Tevar is a god of a monotheistic religion known as Tevarism, where the worship of Tevar is performed quite differently from traditional means. There are no rituals, prayers, and sacrifices. Instead, Tevar simply demands his followers to follow a series of principles which guide people to wisdom and their best self. Most importantly, Tevar refuses to recognize any other god as, well, a god. Instead, he recognizes them as mortals who ended up being powerful. Take that as you will. Yana Yakab. Yana Yakab is a creator god that is quite popular in Vanza, though he goes under numerous names and he has significantly different stories. The larger picture is largely the same. Yana Yakab was once a great warlord living somewhere around the 40,000 of the First Era. He is depicted as one large, orange-like beast humanoid with the face of a squid and the snout of a wolf. He would go on to fight numerous gods, and according to believers, he killed a god named Genkan, a god who we'll talk about later, though this is likely not true. Take that as you will. Nonetheless, Yana Yakab eventually would explode, with his blood becoming the water, his skin becoming the land, and his organs becoming the life on earth, with his brain said to have created the gods and the first people. He is the creator god of numerous fascinating religions. Which one? I cannot get into them here. So let's move on. Akav Sol. Akav Sol, or Sol, however you want to call it, is a bit of an interesting character. Born as a mortal in paradise, he would flee from paradise, committing suicide and... Oh my god! I'm sorry. That just, it's been a while since I wrote in this script, and that just came out of nowhere. Committing suicide and reincarnating as either an ancient Ketavite, a race of tall, dark-skinned people, or as a Velsi, a race of fox people. After this, he would travel around in a continent known as Ahri, rallying up hundreds of powerful mages and wizards before having them killed. Oh my god. And having their magic given to him. Akav Sol then became the lord of rebellions and... God damn it! As he urged on numerous people to rebel against the Chitin in paradise in the 21,000s of the First Era. He would support rebellions in Neuron as well, leading to the great destruction of civilizations. He is said to be the deity who causes the collapse of empires, especially those loyal to the Chitin. It's been a while since I wrote the script, and I nearly forgot about this guy, so that that was funny. Genkan. Genkan was the lord of destruction and death. He is the earliest god to live in this video, dating back from 90,000 to 40,000 of the First Era. Genkan was reportedly so huge and evil that only his grayish-red feet were visible. Genkan would lead numerous conquests and wars against many gods at the time, and he is largely seen as why many of the worlds of this time period are just missing. He eventually disappeared in the 40,000s, his death unknown, with some wondering if it even was a death at all. Some believe that he was just reincarnated as another god, perhaps Azura or Polyanora, who themselves would become infamous for their massive destructive tendencies, similar to Genkan. Dongar Istius. Dongar Istius is represented as a large, grotesque, green goat-like figure. Dongar Istius was born somewhere around 25,000 of the First Era. He was originally the son of Nafum, with Nathum himself being a powerful warriors who are not deities themselves, but who are still very powerful. Dongar Istius, who was just Dongar back then, would eventually kill his father secretly, and he would become the leader of the Nathum. He used this position to gain more and more powers for himself, having his worshippers offer sacrifices to him, which was forbidden. He also was disgruntled with the Chiton, especially when they banished a man named Deval, who we'll talk about very soon. He believed that this banishment was unjust, and so he resigned as the head of the Nathum, which would lead to his corruption being discovered, ironically. Thus, he was forced to flee, and helped Deval during his events, which we'll talk about soon enough. Afterwards, he would use his cunning magic to assassinate and imitate the Lord of Harmony to such a point where he was able to imitate his personality, eye contact, and body language, and other details which were very minor. However, eventually, he was somehow discovered, so he fled once more. But this time, he returned with a massive rebellion army of Nathum and other disgruntled Chiton mortals and gods, including Istius. Istius was immediately killed, and Dongar fled with his body, merging it with himself to become Dongar Istius. Dongar Istius would then create his own version of Paradise, which he would call Allardyce, or Aldis, something like that. And he would go on to imitate the Chiton, going as far as to clone himself to mimic the other Chiton gods. He would manipulate Chiton followers and other people into believing that he was the Chiton, that the old Chiton was corrupted by Shevku, and that they should follow him instead. He is largely seen as the lord of manipulation and deceit. Deval. Deval, also known as the Orgish Fanathar, or Father, is a deity synonymous with the Orgish monsters, which are grotesque flesh monsters. He originally was supposedly a bastard child of Olius, and when he confronted the Chiton about it, they ruled in favor of Olius. Deval then lashed out, leading to his banishment. Enraged, he went to Paradise, where he gathered some gods and deities, including Syathar, who will be mentioned later. These deities formed a coalition known as the First Lendenval, and would set out to attack Neuron. However, Syathar secretly infected Deval with a version of Orgish disease, which turned out to actually strengthen Deval. Now empowered, Deval gathered a large army and attempted to invade Neuron, defeating Dathan at first before eventually being defeated himself. However, he was defeated right before the invasion of the Val Mountain, which would have destroyed Neuron for certain and perhaps even Paradise. Deval led the first major rebellion against the Chiton, and he would later come back in several more Lendenvals, though I'll end his story here for now. Shadowmoor. Shadowmoor is a disgusting figure, so I'll barely talk about him. He is the Lord of Torture, and prioritizes torturing innocent creatures, i.e. women, animals, and especially children. He is depicted as a Velsi, which, fun fact, which is not really fun, this has led to numerous persecutions of Velsi due to some civilizations believing that the Velsi were a creation of Shadowmoor. Once a Chiton, he was eventually corrupted by Thuras, leading to him getting banished, and then he would become one of the most repugnant and evil gods ever. Even Shevku, like Vilmicus, Olius, Apollionora, and Azra, would find his practices repulsing, disgusting, or at the very least, very weird. A torture god who likes children, I'll leave the rest to your imagination. Jegorog. Oh wait, here's another insanely evil god. Well, not as bad as Shadowmoor, and I barely mean that. Jegorog is known for his many evil practices. He is the lord of blood and sorrow, or whatever, and he is represented as a wolf/fox-like person with a short snout, 3 eyes, and a malevolent grin. He was born as one of the sons of Diabella, a god who we'll talk about later. When he essentially was an infant, aka a few decades old, he was attacked by one of his older brothers, an unnamed and unknown deity. Jaggerog had to defend himself, eventually stabbing his brother to death. This killing instilled a bloodlust within Jaggerog, and for over 1,000 years he would go on to secretly murder mortals, creatures, and whatever else he could get his hands upon. After he was discovered, and after he fled, he would create his own realm of Sonor, where he calls upon his followers to kidnap and do a bunch of other bad things. He also forces himself onto numerous women throughout the story. A really bad guy, too. Ayuthuk. Finally, something that's not really fucking evil. Ayuthuk is the name within the continent of Maldura, which relates to the sun. It is a religion which believes that the Ayuthuk, the sun, was created to battle darkness, where the two sides would create the 12-hour cycle. However, the two sides still fight to this day, leading to the hours in the days and nights changing throughout the year. They worship the Ayuthuk on a regular basis and praise it for being the bringer of life. They are generally very friendly towards other religions, and in fact, just because the sun was created doesn't mean that the Ayuthuk only worship the sun. They also can be seen as pacifists, as they usually try to avoid conflict, but they aren't pacifists. They're willing to kill. Yethakar. Yethakar is the Lord of Redemption and the giver of second chances. He is depicted as a beautiful cat. Yethakar was once a Nathum, and he would make himself very well. He would serve through numerous positions within the Chitin, before eventually serving in a rebellion against the Chitin. The rebellion is unknown. He was forced to flee after the rebellion failed, where he would loiter around Nuran, mostly Dunnerland, and where he would worship another Shevku for the sake of his own power. However, eventually, he would have a change of heart and return to the Chitin, and he begged for forgiveness. They granted it to him and re-invited him to the Chitin, where he would redeem himself so greatly that he would become the Lord of Redemption. Sayathar. Sayathar was born somewhere around 30,000 of the First Era as a simple son of a simple mortal within the simple realm of Paradise. His early life is practically unknown, but it is believed that he might have had some sort of unique power within him which caught the attention of the Chitin. Soon enough, he became the Lord of Peace and Prosperity. He was initially tied to his title. However, as time passed, he began to grow more and more disgruntled with the Chitin. Soon enough, he left the Chitin and sent a number of plagues and diseases throughout Nuran and Paradise, making him the Lord of Diseases. Then he joined up forces with Deival, secretly betraying him on several occasions, before eventually Deival was seemingly killed. Sayathar then took the form of a star, and he began to gain a following from people in Nuran, telling ancient peoples that it was the Chitin who had abandoned Nuran after the Lendenval crisis, leaving it to its diseases. He would then go on to launch a massive rebellion against the Chitin, and he nearly succeeded, though he was eventually forced to flee. Sayathar's rebellion was a massive war, which killed well over 80% of Nuran's inhabitants, including 120 million people, all the way up to 140 million people, which was out of 160 million people. His story would continue, but we'll stop here. Lady of Illusions. The Lady of Illusions, as she is known as, is a mysterious and largely unknown figure. In fact, her past is pretty much unknown, with theories ranging from a mortal in paradise to an evil seductress. Nonetheless, she would end up being corrupted by Thuraz, leading to her eventually leaving the Chitin. Here, the story becomes even more ambiguous, with the only knowledge being known is that she created a realm which imitated a peaceful, beautiful world as a part of her illusions. She would become the deity that many illusionists practicing illusion magic would go to, enough to where she is considered the Lordess of Illusions. Kemuka. Kemuka is the Lord of Vengeance and Revenge. He is represented as a dark gray wolf surrounded by a dark, gloomy forest. During his past, his family was murdered of a cultist of an unknown origin who was named Seiyo. Kemuka would spend over 50 years tracking down Seiyo before eventually killing him, chopping his limbs apart, and eating them for some reason. Kemuka would serve as the bringer of revenge for various crimes such as murder, rape, genocide, and other horrific crimes. Most people consider him as a Demesis, aka just a neutral deity, due to his unwillingness to deal with people who commit horrible crimes, like the ones I've mentioned. And with that, the video ends here. Thank you all for watching. These lore videos I can't do this fucking voice. But seriously though, these lore videos really do take a lot of time to brainstorm and come up with and, motivation to actually write down. So if you may, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting what you think down below. Also, consider my Discord server if you want to play some Dungeons and Dragons with me with my lore. You'll learn a lot of lore in these games, and they'll be quite different than traditional Dungeons and Dragons games. If you want to know more about a specific religion or deity, or perhaps something unrelated but which is still in my universe, make sure to let me know in the comments below. Anyways, that's it for today. Make sure to have a good day or night, and I'll see you all another time. Let me go up to that one god. What was his name? Akav Soul, yes. Akav Soul. I think I'm gonna make... I don't know. That was just really random to me. Anyway, goodbye.